Trump, The Art of the Deal by Donald J. Trump with Tony Schwartz. Picture this moment with me. You're standing in Central Park, the beating heart of New York City. For 6 frustrating years, the beloved Wollman skating rink has sat there like a ghost. A construction site gathering dust, a daily reminder of how badly the government can mess things up. The city's already burned through $13 million, 6 times what they originally planned, and now they're saying it'll take another 2 years to finish. 2 more years before families can lace up their skates again. The whole city's fed up with it. It's become more than just a broken rink. It's a punchline, a symbol of everything that's wrong with red tape and bureaucracy. Then something unexpected happens. A young real estate developer, not even 40 years old yet, decides he's had enough of watching this embarrassment unfold from his apartment window. He writes a letter to Mayor Ed Koch with an offer that makes people's jaws drop. He says, "Give me control. I'll rebuild this rink on my own dime, and I'll have it open in 6 months, before winter arrives." The city practically laughs in his face. The mayor fires back with a sarcastic response, basically daring him to prove it, never actually believing he would. But the public and the press, they're hooked. Here's someone willing to put his reputation and his money on the line to fix what's broken. The pressure starts building, and in a shocking turn of events, the city finally gives in. The young developer gets to work immediately. He doesn't just meet that 6-month deadline, he crushes it. In barely 4 months, and coming in $750,000 under budget, the Wollman Rink is completely rebuilt, gorgeous, and open to the public. That young developer was Donald J. Trump, and this story captures everything we're about to dive into today. We're exploring his 1987 blockbuster book, Trump, The Art of the Deal. This isn't some dry textbook about real estate. It's an insider's look at the mind of a master dealmaker during the decade when he transformed the New York City skyline. It became a #1 bestseller, camping out on that list for almost a year, and it sold millions of copies around the world, inspiring a whole generation of entrepreneurs. Today I'm breaking down the timeless lessons hidden in this book. We're going behind the scenes to see how massive deals actually get made. You'll discover why imagination is your secret weapon, why the best investments are sometimes the ones you walk away from, and how to flip a disaster into your biggest advantage. By the time we're done, you won't just understand the principles behind deal-making, you'll understand the art of transforming wild visions into concrete reality. So let's jump in. To really get the art of the deal, you need to understand the artist behind it. And for Donald Trump, cutting deals wasn't just business, it was his canvas. As he puts it, other people paint beautifully on canvas or write wonderful poetry. I like making deals, preferably big deals. That's how I get my kicks. This wasn't about piling up money. He says he already had more than he'd ever need. For him, it was about the game itself, the pure thrill of playing. His life wasn't structured around endless formal meetings in stuffy boardrooms. He kept things loose, his door always open, letting each day bring whatever opportunities it would. This freewheeling approach left room for imagination, for the kind of entrepreneurial thinking that suffocates in rigid corporate structures. A typical day might involve over 100 phone calls, dozens of spontaneous meetings, and a constant river of information and opportunities flowing through. But this mindset, this burning drive to build and win, didn't appear out of nowhere. It was forged in his childhood, shaped profoundly by one man, his father, Fred Trump. Fred's story reads like the classic American dream. When his own father died, Fred was just 11 years old, suddenly thrust into the role of man of the house. He started small, building garages for neighbors, and by the time he finished high school, he was constructing and selling single-family homes in Queens. His company was called Elizabeth Trump & Son, not because his mother was the real builder, but because he wasn't even old enough to sign his own checks yet, so she had to do it for him. Growing up, Donald and his brother Robert would tag along with their father to construction sites. What he absorbed from his father wasn't just about bricks and mortar. It was a whole philosophy. Fred Trump's mantra was straightforward and unforgiving. Get in, get it done right, and get out. He was a master of efficiency. He knew the cost of everything, down to the penny, and he negotiated like a bulldog. He taught his son that every penny matters, because those pennies become dollars. To this day, Trump says he'll still pick up the phone to haggle with a contractor over a few $1,000s, not just to save the money, but because it's the principle of not letting anyone take advantage of him. Fred Trump was relentless. He'd be at his construction sites at 6 in the morning, pushing everyone forward. He'd start a building in Brooklyn at the same time as 2 competitors nearby, and he'd finish months before they did. His buildings would look sharper, the lobbies would feel nicer, and he'd rent them out fast. Often his competitors would go belly up, and his father would swoop in and buy their half-finished buildings at fire sale prices. This was the world Donald Trump grew up in, a world of toughness, relentless drive, and obsessive attention to detail and cost. But there was a crucial fork in the road between father and son. Fred was perfectly content building rent-controlled housing in Brooklyn and Queens. It was tough, grinding work with razor-thin profit margins. You had to use red brick because it cost a penny less per brick than tan brick. Donald admired his father's success, but he knew early on that he wanted something different, something grander, more glamorous, more electrifying. He realized that if he wanted to be known as more than just Fred Trump's son, he had to carve out his own identity, and for him that meant one place: Manhattan. This ambition didn't always flow smoothly. He admits to being an aggressive kid, even giving a music teacher a black eye in 2nd grade because he thought the teacher didn't know anything about music. This led his father to ship him off to the New York Military Academy, hoping some discipline would channel that aggression into achievement. It worked. He learned how to operate within structure, how to respect authority without being intimidated by it, and eventually rose to become a captain of the cadets. After graduating from the Wharton School of Finance, he moved into a tiny studio apartment in Manhattan. It was dark and dingy, but he says moving in was probably more thrilling for him than moving into the top of Trump Tower years later. He was a kid from the outer boroughs who'd finally arrived at the center of the universe. He immediately set out to decode this new world. He joined Le Club, which at the time was the hottest, most exclusive spot in the city, a place where successful men and beautiful women mingled. Getting in wasn't easy. He was a complete nobody. When he called asking about membership, the person on the phone literally laughed at him. But he was persistent. He kept calling, finally tracked down the name of the club's president, and convinced the man to meet him. He promised he wouldn't try to steal the wives of the older, wealthy members, and just like that, he was in. Le Club became his classroom. He was working even while he was out at night, learning how the New York scene operated, and meeting the people he'd one day strike deals with. But watching from the sidelines wasn't in his DNA. He was hunting for his first big deal. And this brings us to the first and perhaps most important of his trump cards, the core principles that define his art of the deal. That first card is, think big. Trump says it's dead simple. If you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Most people think small because they're terrified, afraid of success, afraid of making decisions, afraid of actually winning. That fear, he believes, gives people like him a massive advantage. He wasn't satisfied just earning a comfortable living. He wanted to make a statement, to build something monumental. This wasn't just about constructing taller buildings. It was a complete mindset. His first major project on his own wasn't some modest apartment building in Queens. It was a massive 1,200-unit apartment development in Cincinnati called Swifton Village. He and his father discovered it by combing through lists of government foreclosures, something he did in college while his friends were reading the sports pages. The project was a disaster zone. Only 2/3 occupied, the developers had gone bankrupt, and the government just wanted it off their hands. But where everyone else saw failure, he saw opportunity. They bought the entire 1,200-unit complex for less than $6 million, which was half of what it cost to build just a few years earlier. Even better, they secured a mortgage for the full purchase price, meaning they acquired the entire project without putting down a single dollar of their own money. Thinking big meant seeing the upside. It takes almost the same energy to manage 50 units as it does 1,200, but with 1,200, the potential reward is exponentially greater. They invested in cosmetic improvements, like adding clean white shutters and new doors, which gave the cold brick buildings a feeling of warmth and home. They kept the property spotlessly clean. Within a year, the buildings were fully rented. A few years later, acting on a tip from a tenant that the surrounding neighborhood was declining, he sold the entire complex for $12 million, a $6 million profit on a deal that cost him nothing to enter. Thinking big is about vision, but vision alone isn't enough. This leads to the second trump card: protect the downside, and the upside will take care of itself. People think of him as a gambler, he says, but he insists he's never gambled in his life. A gambler plays the slot machines. He prefers to own the slot machines. He's not a believer in positive thinking. He believes in the power of negative thinking. He always enters a deal anticipating the worst. If you can live with the worst-case scenario, the good will take care of itself. His first moves into Atlantic City perfectly illustrate this. When he heard that a single casino hotel could generate more profit than an entire chain of regular hotels, his ears perked up. This was in the mid-70s, when New Jersey was considering legalizing gambling in the depressed resort town. Speculators were rushing in, buying up tiny properties for wildly inflated prices, betting the gambling referendum would pass. Trump decided to wait. He knew that if the referendum failed, those properties would be worthless overnight. He preferred to pay a higher price for a sure thing than a low price for a gamble. When the referendum did pass, and he finally assembled a prime site on the boardwalk, he still didn't rush to build. He waited to get his gaming license first. This meant paying carrying costs on the land longer, but it protected him from spending hundreds of millions on construction only to be denied a license at the last minute, which is exactly what happened to Baron Hilton just a few years later. Once he had his site and his license, Holiday Inns approached him about a partnership. Some people told him, "Why give up 50% of your profits?" But Holiday Inns offered to pay back all the money he'd already invested, finance the entire construction, and guarantee him against any losses for 5 years. The choice was simple: own 100% of a project with all the risk, or own 50% with zero risk. It was an easy decision. He protected the downside. This principle connects to another trump card: maximize your options. He never gets too attached to one deal or one approach. He keeps multiple balls in the air because most deals, no matter how promising they seem at first, fall apart. And for every deal he pursues, he always has several different ways to make it work. This was never more true than with his very first Manhattan venture. Back in 1974, he got an option on the massive, abandoned Penn Central rail yards on the west side of Manhattan, 100 acres of undeveloped riverfront property. His first plan was to build middle-income housing with government financing. But then New York City's financial crisis hit, and the money for public housing evaporated. He didn't waste time wallowing. He immediately pivoted to his second option, promoting the site as the perfect location for a new convention center. For years, the city had been trying to build a convention center on a different, far more complicated site over the water. Trump launched a public campaign, holding press conferences and relentlessly pointing out the flaws of the other sites and the strengths of his own. He argued his site was more accessible, cheaper to build on, and had more room for expansion. It took years of pushing, but ultimately the city agreed and chose his site for what's now the Jacob Javits Convention Center. He'd maximized his options, and when his first plan crashed, his second plan soared. But how do you convince a city, a bank, or a partner that your way is the right way? This brings us to one of the most crucial elements of his art: use your leverage. Leverage, he says, is the biggest strength you can have. It's having something the other person wants, needs, or simply can't do without. But often, leverage isn't something you have. It's something you create through imagination and salesmanship. The story of the Commodore Hotel is the ultimate masterclass in creating leverage from thin air. In 1974, the area around Grand Central Station was rotting. The Commodore, a massive old hotel right next to the station, was hemorrhaging millions, defaulting on its taxes, and was just filthy, dingy, and run down. But on a morning walk, Trump saw what others missed. He saw thousands of well-dressed commuters pouring out of Grand Central. He realized the problem wasn't the location, it was the hotel. The location was spectacular. He was just 27 years old with barely any Manhattan track record. He had to convince the hotel's owner, the bankrupt Penn Central Railroad, to give him an option. He had to convince a major hotel operator, Hyatt, to partner with him. He had to convince banks to lend him money when nobody was lending in New York. And most audaciously, he had to convince the city to give him a massive 40-year tax abatement that nobody had ever received before. He was juggling all these pieces simultaneously, and none of them would fall into place without the others. The banks wouldn't lend without the tax abatement. The city wouldn't give the abatement without firm financing, and Hyatt wouldn't fully commit without the other pieces in place. So he created leverage. With the city, he used fear. He convinced the Commodore's owners to announce they were planning to close the hotel for good. This created the specter of a massive, boarded-up building in the heart of Midtown, a visual wound that would devastate an already struggling city. Suddenly, his plan to transform the hotel didn't seem like some developer's pipe dream. It seemed like the city's only hope. With the banks, he played on their sense of moral obligation. He told them, "You owe it to New York. If you won't invest in your own city, how can you expect it to turn around?" And with Hyatt, he leveraged their ambition. Hyatt was successful, but they had no flagship hotel in New York City, and he knew they wanted one desperately. He was offering them the key to the city on a silver platter. The negotiation for the tax abatement was high-stakes poker. Other hotel owners were furious, arguing he was getting an unfair advantage. A city councilman held a press conference to denounce the deal, but Trump's strategy was to go on offense. When a reporter asked him why he got a 40-year tax abatement, he famously replied, "Because I didn't ask for 50. In the end, the city, desperate to see development, gave him the deal. With the abatement secured, the banks finally came through with financing. He completely transformed the old, crumbling Commodore into the sleek, modern, glass-sheathed Grand Hyatt Hotel. It was a spectacular success from day one, revitalizing the entire 42nd Street neighborhood and proving that leverage, even when conjured from nothing, can move mountains. The Grand Hyatt story also illustrates another key principle: enhance your location. Everyone says the key to real estate is location, location, location. Trump says that's only half the story. You don't necessarily need the best location. You need the best deal, and you can enhance a location through promotion and psychology. This brings us to his masterpiece, Trump Tower. The site of the old Bonwit Teller store at 57th Street and 5th Avenue was already arguably the best location in New York City. But Trump didn't just build a building there. He created a legend. He set out to sell not just apartments, but an event, a fantasy. First, he had to get the property. For years he wrote letters to the owner, Franklin Jarman, who told him he was crazy to even think about buying it. Trump was relentless. Then, years later, he read in a magazine that Jarman had been pushed out, and the new CEO, John Hannigan, had been brought in to save the struggling parent company by selling off assets. At 9 o'clock the next morning, he was on the phone with Hannigan, who said, "Yeah, you're the guy who's been writing all those letters. When would you like to meet?" Timing, persistence, and a dash of luck had finally aligned. Assembling the site was a deal-making puzzle of staggering complexity. He not only bought the Bonwit building and its lease, but he also had to acquire the underlying land from Equitable Life Assurance Society, which he did by forming a partnership with them. Then he went to Walter Hoving, the legendary head of the adjacent Tiffany & Company, to buy his air rights, the right to build in the space above Tiffany's store. This negotiation with Hoving reveals so much about dealing with different types of people. Trump showed Hoving two models. One was the beautiful, terraced building he wanted to build. The other was a hideous, skinny tower with tiny wire mesh windows that he'd be forced to build if he didn't get the air rights. An ugly monolith that would loom over Tiffany's forever. He told Hoving, "I'm offering you $5 million to let me preserve Tiffany." Hoving, a man of impeccable integrity, liked the concept and shook his hand. "Young man," he said, "I made a deal with you. That's that." Even when other air rights deals were made for far more money while Hoving was on vacation, he honored their handshake. He was a man of his word. With the site assembled, Trump set out to create a building larger than life. This is where he mastered another principle: get the word out. He says, "I play to people's fantasies. People want to believe that something is the biggest, the greatest, the most spectacular." He calls it truthful hyperbole, an innocent form of exaggeration and a very effective form of promotion. Trump Tower was promoted as an event. The atrium was jaw-dropping. A 6-story space of rare pink breccia perniche marble, polished brass, and an 80-foot waterfall. The design was striking, a sawtooth shape with 28 sides, ensuring every apartment had spectacular, panoramic views in multiple directions. He positioned Trump Tower as the only place for a certain kind of wealthy, glamorous person to live, and it worked. Celebrities and wealthy international buyers flocked to the building, paying unprecedented prices. When a rival luxury building, Museum Tower, priced its apartments lower, Trump wasn't worried. He knew that by pricing lower, they just announced to the world they weren't as good as Trump Tower. The kind of buyer he was after didn't want the best buy. They wanted the best. Of course, promotion is one thing. You also have to follow another critical rule: deliver the goods. You can't con people, at least not for long. As much as he promoted Trump Tower relentlessly, he also built a product of incredible quality. He spent whatever it took to make it the best. For the atrium's marble, he and his team went to the quarry and personally marked off the finest slabs, scrapping nearly 60% of the total stone to avoid any imperfections. He used the finest craftsmen. This obsession with quality is what created the mystical aura that made Trump Tower the hottest ticket in town. But even with massive success in his hands, he still had to fight back. This is another core belief. When people treat you unfairly, you fight back hard. After Trump Tower was built, the city, led by Mayor Koch, denied him a standard tax exemption called a 421A, which was given to virtually every other developer to encourage construction. Koch's administration positioned it as taking on a greedy developer building for the rich. But Trump believed he was legally entitled to it and that the city was playing politics. He sued. He fought them in 6 different courts over several years. People told him he was crazy, that it was a no-win situation politically. But he refused to fold. And in the end he won, forcing the city to grant him the exemption. This aggressive, never-back-down attitude wasn't just reserved for politics. He took the same approach in business. After partnering with Holiday Inns in Atlantic City, he grew deeply dissatisfied with their management of the casino they built together. The partnership soured, and he eventually fought to buy out their share, taking full control of the facility he renamed Trump Plaza. But then, in a brilliant move that shows how he never lets an opportunity pass, he turned around and started buying up stock in the Holiday Inn's parent company. The stock price soared on speculation he was planning a takeover. Holiday Inns, trying to fend him off, restructured the company and took on massive debt. At that point, Trump sold all his stock, walking away with millions in profit. In effect, he earned back a huge chunk of the money he'd just paid them to buy out their share of his casino. The one time he didn't follow his own rule of protecting the downside was with the United States Football League, the USFL. He bought the New Jersey Generals in 1983. It was a failing team and a failing league, but he saw it as a fun, long-shot fantasy, a chance to own a pro football team and take on the NFL monopoly. He believed the USFL's biggest mistake was playing in the spring when fan and television interest was low. He pushed his fellow owners to move the league to fall to compete directly with the NFL. His plan was straightforward. Either one of the 3 networks would give them a fall television contract, or the league would have a strong antitrust case against the NFL for monopolizing the airwaves. He invested heavily, signing star players like Heisman Trophy winner Herschel Walker and quarterback Doug Flutie. He turned the Generals into a winning team that drew huge crowds. But many of his fellow owners lacked his resources and vision. The league struggled. And when the networks, under pressure from the NFL, refused to offer a fall contract, the USFL filed its antitrust suit. They won the case. The jury found that the NFL was an illegal monopoly that had damaged the USFL, but in a stunning and bizarre twist, they awarded the league only $1 in damages. It was a hollow victory. Without significant financial compensation, the league couldn't survive. The USFL folded. It was a deal that didn't work out, a long shot that didn't pay off. But even in failure, he learned a valuable lesson. He'd taken a gamble without a real safety net, and it reinforced his core belief in always protecting the downside. This brings us to the final story, and it's a perfect blend of all these principles combined. It's the story of the West Side Yards, the massive 100-acre site where he first tried to build in the 70s. After he let his option expire, the property was sold to an Argentine developer named Francisco Macri. Macri spent years and over $100 million trying to get his project, Lincoln West, off the ground. But he made mistake after mistake. He was an outsider who didn't understand New York politics. He made far too many concessions to the city, agreeing to over $100 million in giveaways, like rebuilding a subway station and a Con Edison smokestack, before he'd even sold a single apartment. His design was bland and uninspiring, and he could never secure financing. By 1984, McCree was drowning financially, and his bank was about to foreclose. Trump stepped in. Because McCree was so desperate, and because Trump was one of the few developers with the resources and vision to tackle such a massive project, he was able to buy back the entire 100-acre site for just under $100 million. It was an incredible bargain. Years earlier, he'd had to walk away because the timing wasn't right, and he didn't have the resources. Now, after the successes of the Hyatt and Trump Tower, he was ready. He immediately scrapped McCree's boring plans and went back to his first principle: think big. He renamed the project Television City. He knew that NBC was considering leaving New York for New Jersey, which would be a huge psychological and economic blow to the city. He saw an opportunity for mutual benefit. He had the one thing NBC needed that nobody else in New York could offer: enough space to build massive, modern television studios. He used the potential of keeping NBC in New York as leverage with the city to get the approvals he wanted. And to capture the public's imagination, he announced that the centerpiece of Television City would be the world's tallest building. It was bold, audacious, and controversial. It sparked intense debate, but it also generated a tidal wave of free publicity, creating instant mystique for a project that was still just a dream. That's the art of the deal, not just seeing what is, but seeing what could be, and then having the courage, creativity, and relentless drive to make it happen. So what do we take away from all of this? When you strip away the massive buildings, the high-stakes negotiations, and the larger-than-life personality, you find a set of principles that are surprisingly timeless and applicable to anyone with a dream, regardless of size. The most powerful lesson for me is the idea of creating your own reality. Trump didn't wait for opportunities to fall into his lap. He created them. He saw a decaying hotel and envisioned a glittering success. He saw an abandoned rail yard and envisioned the world's tallest building. He didn't accept the world as it was. He saw it for what it could be, and then he bent every rule, pushed every boundary, and poured every ounce of his energy into pulling that vision into existence. This isn't just about real estate. It's a lesson in refusing to be limited by your circumstances. Another profound idea is the power of persistence. Think about him writing letter after letter to the owner of Bonwit Teller, who'd flatly rejected him. He kept going for years on the slimmest of hopes. And when the timing was finally right, he was the one who got the call. How many of us give up on an idea after the first no? This book is a testament to the fact that sheer, relentless persistence can often be the single difference between success and failure. And finally, there's the deep understanding of human nature. The art of the deal is really the art of understanding people. It's knowing that a handshake from someone like Walter Hoving is more binding than a 100-page contract from someone else. It's knowing that fear can motivate a city, that ambition can motivate a partner, and that pride can motivate a competitor. He understood what the other side wanted, what they feared, and what they needed, and he used that understanding as his ultimate form of leverage. So what can you do with this right now? First, start thinking bigger about your own life. What's your world's tallest building? What's the grandest vision you have for yourself? Don't be afraid of its scale. As the book teaches, if you're going to be thinking anyway, you might as well think big. Second, do your homework. Fred Trump taught his son to know the cost of everything. Before you go into any negotiation, whether it's for a raise, a car, or just convincing your parents of something, know your facts inside and out. Knowledge is leverage. And third, don't be afraid to ask. Trump wasn't afraid to ask for a 40-year tax abatement, for membership in an exclusive club where he knew nobody, or for a chance to rebuild a skating rink when the city had failed for 6 years. The worst thing that can happen is someone says no, but if you don't ask, the answer is always no. That was a summary of Trump, The Art of the Deal. We've explored the highlights today, the big stories and the core principles, but I'll be honest with you, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found when you walk the path yourself. The true magic happens in those quiet moments of reading, when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in an unexpected way. This journey we took was designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time. If anything we've talked about, the ambition, the strategy, the sheer audacity, has resonated with you, I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you look at challenges and opportunities in your own life. You can find a link to the book in the description below. Also, if you found this summary valuable and it sparked some new ideas for you, please show some support by hitting that like button and subscribing to the channel. That way, you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book from the billionaire's bookshelf. Let's keep learning and growing together.